Please welcome back to stage your co-chair, John Paul Gertz.
Could use a little more Joan Jett, I think. Welcome back. I hope you had a great lunch and a chance to soak in some of our nice warm Florida weather. If you would, remember to sign into the TEA SATE app so it populates. It's a great tool for the conference. I'd also like to take a moment to give a big hand to our global sponsors, the Chime Along Group, Christie, the Hedema Group, SeaWorld Parks and Entertainment, Universal Creative, Wanda, and Walt Disney Imagineering. We owe you a huge debt of gratitude. Thank you. So let's kick off the afternoon with our first pillar of SATE. Would you please put your hands together for our storytelling sponsor, Eric Cantrell, Sales Manager for Barco.
On behalf of Barco, we are proud to once again sponsor the storytelling segment of the SATE conference. We're all storytellers, and that's how we as humans communicate with each other, even when we don't have a common language or use written or spoken words at all. Around the dinner table, we talk about what we did that day, or what the dogs did when they saw a squirrel, or what we saw happening on our favorite TV show. We're always telling stories. And the technology that enables us to connect, phones, Instagram, Facebook, etc., it gets out of the way to let us focus on the context. As in life, in themed entertainment, it all starts with the story. Technology, architecture, sets, actors, props, costumes, scent, water, fire, timing, all of that is just tools to help convey the story, the sum of which is the experience. And the experience begets more stories when the audience tells their friends about it, and they share that on social media. As an audiovisual manufacturer, Barco makes tools that deliver light and color and pixels and sound waves with the right timing. And all that technology that makes that happen disappears when the audience's attention is on the experience. Poorly executed, any one of those elements can pull the audience's attention out of the story and back into reality. And that makes it onto social media too. Designers have to balance the use of these tools to maintain the audience's immersion in the story. I think we can all agree, storytelling is one of the most important ingredients in the experience recipe. I mean, the story gives the architecture and the technology, in fact, the entire experience, context. So it just makes sense that the focus on this afternoon will be design and how technology, architecture, and experience work together to bring story to life. And here to start us off is Bettina Buckley.
Good afternoon. So several years ago, I had the opportunity to work with Brian Morrow and the Fantastic SeaWorld team as a show producer for their Antarctica attraction. And you may or may not be aware that the focus of that story is the penguin's journey. So I had to learn a lot about penguins. So this is me with a baby king chick, his name's Dallas, and I became to have a real certain fondness for penguins. And so that's why we thought this next clip was a perfect segue into the topic of costume design and this lovely story since our host is SeaWorld. You can roll the clip.
One of our older delis who was going through feather loss. Wetsuit was made for her, and now recently she went through her natural molt and doesn't need to wear the wetsuit anymore. We're all amazed. We're absolutely amazed. You see this bird and what she was going through, and now here she is. It's just so cool. She's got all of her feathers now, and she's spending more time in the water, and she's feeding in the water. I just think it's the neatest thing. Penguins' feathers are so important. They help them to be able to keep warm in the water, so all those feathers, if they don't go through a proper mold every season, it's detrimental to them. We'll continue to monitor Wonder Twin just as we do every individual bird. And if she ever needs the wetsuit again, we've got it. It's there for her. So every animal's unique. And it's really great that here at SeaWorld we can use these innovative ideas to care for them.
So besides just having a sense of humor, I think this is a perfect example of how a costume does not have the benefit of a controlled environment or CGI to achieve its desired effects. And it really required some out-of-the-box thinking of the designer on the materials and the durability of the designer and for the costume, or in this case, his dive suit. So we're going to switch gears now and go from tiny little costumes to big fantastical costumes. And from the earliest childhood, we're all captivated by the magic of costumes. A costume isn't just colorful clothing that the character, the performer puts on. It's something you become. And it's almost like the costume has the power to transform you, if even only for a little while. One might say that the role of the costume designer is to make sure that the right clothes on the right person at the right time. Fantastical costumes and fashion design is not new. We're all exposed to amazing costumes in film, on Broadway, in fashion magazines, but it's really so much more. Creating that perfect recipe for entertainment costume design is akin to creating this wonderful up-close magic trick. It should fill you with awe, it should delight, it should look effortless, and it needs to be repeatable. So I'm really excited to introduce this topic of costume design to you today, and we're really lucky to have with us today Morena Rada. She is our lead mixologist and one of the most versatile costume designers working today. Her team comes a long way to join us. Virginia, Jake, and Jason have traveled from Hong Kong to share with us what I think you will agree to be some really intriguing ideas and thoughts, as well as Lisa, who is a former aerospace R&D materials specialist and now with Disney costuming, and I don't know that it gets much more technical than that. The mission of Morena and the team of experts is to discuss the recipe of making the audience feel that movie magic in person, close enough to touch it, and yet how to recreate it again day after day after day. And without further ado, Morena.
All right. Hello. Thank you for coming back after lunch. I hope you're still awake. And we are here to discuss costume design. I'm not sure how many of you are familiar or utilize costumes in your immersive entertainment. And I'm hoping to enlighten you a little bit today with this incredible team that's here with me. And when Bettina asked me earlier this year if I was interested in presenting a topic on costumes that was near and dear to my heart, I immediately thought about how the costume element, which is often separate and often secondary from the rest of the creative team or the creative process, how that crucial costume element can be a wonderful, compelling experience. For the topic of today's panel is Deconstructing the Magic of Cutting-Edge Entertainment Costumes. Four of my favorite collaborators are here on the stage. We've done some incredible things together, and they have been thinking outside the box, and that's actually why I asked them to be here, because I don't want to really discuss traditional costuming today. I want to show you what is possible, and I also want to whet your appetite, and so we can keep going with that creative process in the future. Okay, guess we got to do this. All right. So, Virginia Chu is the founder of Limelight Costumes in Hong Kong. Amazing company. We started working together about in 2007 on the first SpongeBob show for Broadway Asia, and we learned a lot from each other, and we went through some very difficult circumstances to make it all happen, but it was an incredible experience. Lisa Hanuziak is an incredible partner. I couldn't have asked for a better one to further the creative process. We worked together on Festival of Fantasy Parade at Disneyland's Disney World, Magic Kingdom. So it's hard to keep them all clear in my mind. And she will be discussing a lot of stuff we did together, as well as some of the incredible things she does. And then Jake and Jason Soon from Top Right Optoelectronics are also incredible partners from Hong Kong. We met and started working together during Disney's Paint the Night Parade, and created some new, completely innovative costuming, electrified costume items and effects that were just a joy. But I feel we've only scratched the surface. So hoping you guys will use your imagination so we can keep going with that kind of process. So I have to, let's see, go to the next slide. All right, so these are just a few pictures to show you some fantastical costumes that are out there. Matt Davidson's design for Stars on Parade in Paris, and Irina Krujilina's design for Rivers of Light in Animal Kingdom, and then there's the Raven design that we did for Festival of Fantasy, which was really fun. Okay. So, of course, the foundation of everything is storytelling. And in this case, for theme parks, the iconic storytelling is already built in. And we are basically reinventing the same stories over and over again, keep it fresh for the audience and for ourselves, frankly. And these stories are so beloved by everybody that they already come with the story built in their mind. And when we reinvent the familiar, it's a great challenge for designers, especially for a place like Disney, where we're reinventing the same thing constantly. You know, it's kind of like when Karl Lagerfeld does a new Chanel collection, you know, for the last 50 years. You know, it has to keep its same essence, but it's constantly new and relevant today. So this is an example of the Mad Tea Party that we did at Disneyland California Adventure with Haasbos. And in this case, we took the Tim Burton design from the film and that aesthetic and turned it into a rock concert that was super fun and should have looked like, you know, Gwen Stefani's wearing something that, you know, Alice's costume, or Adam Lambert would be doing the Mad Hatter. The next part of storytelling through costume is done through overlays. And what that means is that, for example, a theme park that does medley shows, and it's usually a half-hour show. I'm sure you've all been to them. And it's strung, a series of songs that are strung together. And sorry, my sound just changed again. Is it still okay? All right. So. All right, I'm going to keep going. So a series of songs that are strung together. And in this case, the dance corps, the men and women, have to go from song to song really quickly while the iconic characters are on stage. And in order to do that with very, very quick changes is to put overlays on the dancers so they could complement the iconic characters. And in this case, what we did was we did a different look for every scene. And it's a very simple, one-size-fits-all, easy overlay that we can do on top of costumes. And it's really fun, and they can take them off and dance really, and it's usually unisex. The next part of storytelling in terms of costume is how to use costume as human scenery. And often in parades, the costume is an extension of that same world. Therefore, an example is Festival of Fantasy Parade of Magic Kingdom. We did essentially an aquatic fashion show with seashell girls and lionfish dancers, and these are very large-scale costumes, but they have to walk down the parade route for an hour and look great in full sunlight and be super comfortable and yet be oversized and amazing, and everybody wants to come up to them. Another example is the Thorn Stillwalkers. There were many of those on the street that would fight with Prince Philip, and they extended that world. So it's not just the float, but it's the scale of the float, often stretched out on the street. Now, the second part, of course, is architecture, which we, in costume, we achieve through scale. We achieve through making a costume that essentially melds into a float. We don't know where it begins or where it ends. What is the architecture on a human body? Then how do we achieve that through materials? And do we use inflatables or 3D sculpting or other very lightweight materials that can expand the size of a human being, but also be completely wearable for a long time and last a long time? One example of float and scale, and it was the Fantastic Cinderella that we did for Tokyo Disney Seas. And in this case, there was this incredible piece of machinery, this barge that moved around the center of the lagoon. But this barge would telescope, and it was covered in LED pixels and videos, and it would constantly change sizes. And the video would change. There would be fountains mounted all over it. There was mist and wind in the middle of all of this, and it housed inside of it 3 performers, Mickey and the Cinderella performer. And it had to be a very quick change of going inside the core of this machine and come back up. And in this case, Cinderella, the top part of her, we couldn't achieve with a regular dress, with a hoop dress, because there was no place to hide it. So we did it by using an inflatable bladder, covered it with the same type of LED pixels that were on the float, and it inflated instantly around her, and she would wear an electrified costume above the waist and an electrified wig that was a sculpted inner lit wig. And it was a great solution after we tried many other things. By the way, that project also happened during the tsunami and the earthquake in Japan. So it was a great challenge all around how to make that happen. Another way to achieve costume scale is just having an army of very similar costumes that of the same color, or to expand the look across the whole parade route. In this case, this was Disney Fan Days. We did a DuckTales parade. It was one night only event. And it was challenging because for one night only, the budget would be limited. So how do you achieve that and make it super cute? We constructed overalls that are inspired by the animation and by the 3 little ducks. And we made them unisex, highly adjustable, just changed the top colors, and added very padded, adorable butts that they can wiggle in. And it was a wonderful way to do it for a one-night thing. Hopefully they can use it for more than one night. But it filled the task. And the interesting thing about this is that in Paris, the shop that built these essentially would build the couture for Dior and for Gaultier. And so they applied all of their skill sets to doing something as fun and whimsical as something like this. The next step in architecture is, going back to that question of, is it a costume, is it a float? And in this case, we have 3 fairies on whirly bugs that were hidden inside their skirts so they can glide on the parade route, which was extremely, it was fantastic because the movement is very unlike just dancing on a parade route. And then there's Tinkerbell in the Paint the Night Parade, who was inside this funnel of light. And for example, for her, we had to harness her incredibly so she's comfortable for an hour and a half that she's up there. The wings were plexiglass with side light, and the dress was like a wraparound dress that was electrified that would go on after she got completely strapped in and made comfortable. We have to think of every single thing that could happen to the performer because their comfort is key, or else they cannot perform for the length of time. Unlike in a movie or even on Broadway where maybe they wear it for a 5-minute scene. In this case on a parade route, they have to do it for an hour and a half. By the time they get up there and by the time they even can come back down, it takes even longer. It probably takes twice as long as the parade lasts. Another example of architecture is how to build the structures on a human body. And back to Fantastic in TDS, in Tokyo Disney Seas, because all the performers were on these barges on the lagoon, they were constantly exposed to water and wind and really difficult. It was really difficult for them to get dressed because they would have to go underneath the parade. It's not a parade. It's underneath the barge and get dressed really quickly and come back out, and we'd be able to withstand all that and go back down and take it all off. So we built these really lightweight structures, these armors that were in the shape of the monkeys, very sort of abstract, and UV painted them so at only key moments they can be seen. And the whole face was perforated so they had maximum vision, and it didn't matter if they got wet. So this was a great solution, and we wound up doing it in California as well. The next example next to it is Coral Girl that we did for Festival Fantasy Parade, and the initial way we achieved it is by making molds and filleting with resin that was really hard at the base and very soft at the tip so it wouldn't hurt the performer. And I think in the meantime, Lisa's probably revamped that design. But it just shows you that the process is constantly going, and we have to learn and keep and leapfrog from our last process into the next one. And an example of rethinking traditional materials, normally you see wigs that are made of human or synthetic hair, and in this case we used horsehair ribbon or tubing to create very, very lightweight wigs. Because in theme parks, it costs a lot of money to maintain wigs. And it behooves us to find new ways of turning something like a wig into a headdress that can be much more easily maintained and give you the maximum sort of whimsy and beauty. And the team in Japan was incredible, and they constructed these really pretty wigs, and the team in Florida as well. What you see on the right was the fiber optic wigs that we did for the Paint the Night Parade in Hong Kong only. We had these girls with these incredible fiber optic wigs that would be programmable, and they would change colors, and it was a challenge. And of course, to make it even more challenging, because a lot of times in electric parades you don't see faces. Everything lights up, but the face is gone. So in order to not just have little points of light or those antennae that shine into your face, we did these fiber optic eyelashes that were able to be glued on, and were also programmable, and they were fantastic because it brought the audience's eye straight to their face, and it wasn't lost. Sometimes you get to the point where you run out of money. But you still need scale, and you still need to have a fantastic costume out there. So for Paint the Night, when we realized that we kind of used up our R&D budget, but we needed to do something that fit the Pixar mold, we found an amazing vendor that did these Zorb balls in China. And so we got them on board to make the balls, and also put them on performers with stilts, because of course everything had to be up higher than the audience so they can be seen and they could still jump around like balls. And we created the Pixar balls with the clear Zorb balls and lighting that Jake provided, and they were also programmable. So it turned out to be a really fun and relatively inexpensive solution, even in the midst of a very expensive parade. And then, of course, we used inflatables off the shelf for other costumes as well in Japan and in Florida for costumes, which is really fun. We've also done, of course, custom inflatables, which is a lot more interesting. And one of them was the Ulf inflatable character costume that Lisa helped out with, because a lot of times inflatables can be fantastic. They move really well. They're very lightweight, but constructing the face is problematic. It's really hard to achieve the animation quality and maybe the detail that we would want. So Lisa constructed in the shop a silicone mask that worked perfectly for the mime. And that was attached to the inflatable. And it was really great. And then the costume shop built all the knit shirt and the tweed pants, and it looked quite realistic. On the right, you will see the inflatable genie hand, which we did for the Back to the Fantasmic in Japan. And that was, again, a very, very, very quick change. And it was an inflatable company in Japan that constructed the hands and also painted them in UV paint. And we had these dancers next to the inflatable hand with sculpted heads that were fully perforated so they can easily see and can get dressed really quickly. Puppetry, of course, is something that costume and puppets marry quite often, and that could be a whole panel in itself. But I thought I'd at least bring it in to show you that it could be an element of costuming for those of you that don't often use them. When I was last in China, I was working on a project for Ocean Park, and one of the costume shops I was working with, Cube Decor, that some of you may know, had built this fantastic inflatable puppet of the lizard where the performer could put his hand inside and articulate. So I wanted to share that with you because it was super charming and a wonderful sort of extension of the performer and puppeteer. And then on the right, you can see puppets like the close-act theater still walking puppets that were really effective and lightweight and a large scale, and they have great potential to be lit from within. So something like that would definitely work for a theme park environment. Then we get to technology, which is my favorite part. Sorry, I even forgot my own script, I'm just talking. So it's become my passion lately, and how to push costuming into using more and more cutting edge technology. And for that, obviously, it's about the collaboration with people who don't normally work with costumes. And how do we incorporate that with costumes to sort of delight the audience? For Paint the Night, this was my favorite task. And one of the best things that ever happened is that Steve Davidson, who was the creative director for that, he organized a series of workshops and sort of creative sandboxes that we would play with various vendors that he brought in, that we brought in, that we could just play around and see what could be remotely interesting. And in fact, this is how I met Jake and Jason as well, is by Hong Kong Disneyland bringing them to the process with stuff that they'd done for props before. I don't think they'd done costumes much before. And then we took their technology and sort of pushed it even further. And what is technology? Obviously, it could be materials. Lisa's specialty, so she'll be discussing that a lot. I won't go into too much in length. 3D printing, which we're using constantly now. All these custom materials which have opened the mind of possibilities. Going to like Premiere Vision in Paris and being able to go all these places around the world where people are utilizing different things for a lot of non-costume techniques has been just eye-opening. And I'm constantly looking for vendors and collaborators who want to develop something that actually might apply to costumes. Fabric sublimation is something you've all done, I'm sure, for signage, for costumes, for scenic. But we started this at Disney. We were the guinea pigs about 10 years ago when we did the Pixar Play Parade, which was a parade that it was a low-budget parade, and they didn't have the money to do all of this special trim and embroidery and because Pixar is such a great subject matter and is so vivid and graphic, we thought, let's invest in the machines and we will come up with graphics that can do all that we want to do. And of course, ever since then, it has revolutionized the costume world for us because everything becomes customized now, and there's no point in just getting a fabric off the shelf when you can make it much more interesting. The subject here, or the example here, is the Fantasmic that we did recently in California, because it included all the pirates from Pirates of the Caribbean, and they need to be a one-size-fits-all, once again, easy, quick on, off, sort of overalls that had the skeletons on them, and they had to glow in UV light. So we used UV inks to print and applique, and then added everything else on top of it, and it was one zip deal, and it looked amazing. So, you know, we keep using that technique, and hopefully the next version. Let's see. Electrics. Back to electrics. So back in that sandbox that we talked about before, one of the companies we work with is Flow Toys in California. They do a lot of stuff for Burning Man and, you know, all those cool festivals. And they had these great props that we used, they're called pixel whips. And we took them and incorporated in costumes. And they did these, we used about 12 of them per costume. And Virginia built all of these, which was a nightmare. But they were incredibly effective, and they turned out to be so incredibly magical. And of course, we upgraded their own technology, utilizing the proprietary Disney technology in the brain, and so they could be programmable and go along with the floats. And that was just one of my favorite things I ever got to do. And we also used LEDs that sparkled all over it. It was great fun. And then we get to the experience, costuming, and of course that includes how does the performer feel in a costume, how does the costume change, that's part of the experience, it's transformation, how it moves, how the audience feels about it, what they experience, and the experience of the designer and the design team, and along with in the R&D process. Performer experience involves their safety and their comfort. In a theme park environment, we have to think about that constantly, because otherwise these people will go on medical leave if the shoe is not comfortable, if the harness is too heavy, if the wind will get you and they fall backwards, and if they can't see well enough to do their stunt show. All of this is incredibly important, and we have to think of all of this while we're building the costume. This is an example of something we did at Chamlong for the Journey of Lights parade, and it was a turning tiki mask that was programmable, that was built on a harness, and the batteries were in the back, and all the vision was built into the frame through the negative space, and with little foam pieces that were sculpted. It was a challenge, and it was also really effective. More transformation. What you see on the left is something my friend Joe Kaczarski did. It was a really fun idea for a parade costume where it's this louver transformation on the skirt. And of course, Elsa always has to have her transformation from into the empowered princess that she becomes. This was for the Disney Cruise Lines. Another example of transformation is back to that Fantastic show where we had to do these very simple flower costumes that took up a lot of room, but they had to be waterproof. So the underside of the petals were black, and then as they opened up and the whole sort of garden of flowers blossomed on the lagoon, these petals, these flowers opened up and they twirled around, and it was also very easy to put on and off. One size fits all. You have to think of everything. Another transformation experience, this is back at Chamlong Journey of Lights, is the pre-visualization of what some of these costumes can be. So we sell it to the director. And in this case, we did some GIFs in our costume designs where underneath there was, or not underneath, actually painted on top of the costume were the UV, invisible UV shapes that would light up when we needed them to be scary costumes at a certain point in the parade route. Then another concept for kinetic costumes that I've used the same concept twice. First, we did something like this at Festival of Fantasy Parade, where we designed these very lightweight seahorses that would twirl around by the performer. And it was such a fun idea, and they wound up doing so much more with it that we also did it in Paint the Night and created these incredible pinwheels. Of course, we've gone through several versions of them and adding more light every single time. They're highly programmable and with special laminated plastics that sort of expanded the light. It was an optical illusion that was really fun. So an army of those looked great in that last scene of Paint the Night next to very kinetic Mickey. And then there's the audience, which ultimately is the most important. And how much they love what we do, and how this is the humanity, they appeal to their humanity, and how involved they are, and if they, you know, we know that they like something if they've gone to the trouble to actually create fan art around the costume design, or create their own version of the costume to come to the park and be part of the experience. And last but not least, this is why we're all here, because we are a group of dreamers and makers, that we don't work in a vacuum. And the best part of being a designer is to work with other creative minds who bring something to the table that I would never think of. And what I take from them and what they take from me and what we all take from each other makes the whole so much bigger. So without further ado, I want to introduce you to my first panelist, and who's Virginia Chu, founder of Limelight Costumes. And her company is about 10 years old now. And I'd like to take some credit that I pushed her to start that company, and now she's working with everybody. Well, she was working with everybody in the world, but now she's also constructing, and her incredible team, some of who are here, are constructing some incredible stuff for Dragon and Cirque du Soleil and Disney and Universal and a lot of the people that you guys work with. So, Virginia, take it away.
Thank you. You guys hear me okay? Hi, everyone. You doing okay? Still awake? Great. I'm Virginia from Hong Kong, all the way from Hong Kong. To start with, thank you. To begin our recipe today, I would like to present you some sweet as our starters. What is that? Huh? Okay. Do you know what it looks like or make of before you come out from the kitchen? Sugars. We big thank for the technologies. We have this special cooking method called molecular castonism. To turn the magic ordinary sugars to cotton candy. In our costume shops, we apply the same concept to our costume productions, which is we use the creative way, also take advantage of innovative technologies to turn the ordinary costume elements into amazing costumes. I name it molecular cosmologists. So we believe nothing is impossible to create by a costumer, to create than you expected. We believe when somebody, an ordinary man, come into our shop, we are able to transform them into some kind of man like He-Man, Batman, Spider-Man, all kind of men you can think of. So if we have these experiences, there is we always say that costumes is distinct from fashion and normal clothes. It is an effective way to passing a message or telling a stories. So this is a powerful of costuming, creative costuming. Today, the main course is costume construction and productions developments. I always explain in our costume shop, running a costume shop operation is like running a restaurant. Our costumer, our costume team is a team of chefs. They make magic cooking. But before they do cooking, they have a lot to prepare. We need to understand the scenario, study the script, analyze every single costume design, the background, and understand the designer vision. Before we got all the ingredients ready, we transform it as an amazing costumes. There's some slides I want to walk you through the prototype procedure. You can see this is our mock-up samples built in a size medium mannequin. We focus on the cutting line and also the silhouette, the shape to get the proportion right. This is one of the sample we did for the light parade for Disney. We call it 3-in-1 harness. Why is 3-in-1? 3-in-1 is we serve the purpose of a harness. We serve a purpose as a fire retardant underwear and also a corset support. When we move on to the next mock-up, this will be the actual fabrics. We are building the second mock-up in the real actual fabrics in the actual performance sizes. This fitting process dealing with artistic, technical, and practical issues. Sometimes it takes longer because there is a lot of adjustment, back and forth adjustment until the magic moment. I have inspiration from my daily life, and also I like to transfer the knowledge from different disciplines, like architectural, cooking, painting. This is a very good example and how we combine all the elements together. This is a slide to show you we combining the traditional and modern way to create all the cutting method, the constructions. This is another sample. We make this one for outdoor events. This is inspired by 3 elements. First, a ventilation fan in my office. Second is a bicycle wheel. The third is the windmill in Amsterdam. So when making this costume, we build on the shape, and the performers have a winch. So when she pull, the wheel will turn automatically. This is very amazing. We also apply another technique which happen in our daily life. For example, this is a classical folk art in Asia. You will see a lot of this for the paper offering in the worship ceremonies. The advantage for those costumes is light and collapsible, foldable. Scaffolding. If everybody visit Hong Kong, you will see this around the city. This is the classic way of our building construction, and also they're building the pagoda for Chinese opera. You can see on the slide, the middle one, we use the same technique, but we use the metal frame, and the other one, we use the bamboo strip. So you can see that the different look, different shape we achieve. Paper cuts. In old days, in China, people use the little scissors to cut this motif to put it on the doorway and the window for Chinese New Year blessing. But I apply this technique to hairdress, and we can create the big motif, which is, of course, we are not using scissors right now, we're using laser cut instead. Other than construction, there is some intuitive material I want to introduce to you. but I think Lisa and Jack will be further explain to you. We use silicone a lot. Silicone normally come in gel and liquid form, which we apply on the fabric to achieve the texture, the pattern, without killing the fabric flexibilities. Recently, we find this silicone yarn, which is we use on the industrial, but we use that as a yarn to crochet our own motif. We can make a silicone jumper, one size fit all. This is my favorite one, the fiber optics fabrics. It's washable, free to cut. Once they connect to the power source, you can change any color, right? Programming, right? You can do any effect, right? 3D printing, this is a big hand to the technologies. We use it for a lot on costume accessories and jewelry, but nowadays we can even the whole garment we can use 3D printing to make the whole thing happens. Last but not least is our dessert time. I always say, you know, a good costume only look good is not enough. Like food only tastes good, not enough. We need to concern about the nutrition values. A good costume need to get a perfect balance of 4 aspects: artistic, functional, safety, and comfort. The costume must look good, move well, safe to wear, and feel good. We, as a costume expertise, we need to take care of the performers and also audience to provide them a fantastic show experience. I hope you enjoy the recipe I prepared for you today. Thank you.
I'm here to talk about 3D rapid prototyping and its applications towards design, development, and production of costuming. So our costume development process is something we call the digital pipeline. And that encompasses digital sculpting, digital engineering, as well as digital manufacturing. And that is 3D printing or additive manufacturing. So that touches just about every single part of our process, from costume design, where you print maquettes to see, you know, is it the right scale and proportions, the digital sculptor to check their sculpts, the mechanical engineer to check the fit up, the materials engineer to try different materials, and you know, the costumer, we use these parts in fittings to see if you know, it fits the body properly, and we even rapid prototype things in flexible materials and sew it into a garment. So it's a very useful tool. So just a few of the examples of the ways we use it. We can rapid prototype a prototype piece to check functionality, to check aesthetics. We can check the fit up to the performer, and we can use it as a manufacturing aid, whether it's a trim template or a drill template, and we can use it as a model to fabricate our molds. So there's some very high resolution processes that make very good models for silicone molds. We can actually print our mold if we invert the solid into a negative and print our mold. We can actually print our part that is our end use item. So what people are not aware of, or most people are not aware of, is there's hundreds of materials out there designed for rapid prototyping. Different technologies. So when you're selecting your material, you ask yourself, what is it going to be used for? Is it going to be subjected to heat? Is it against the body? Does it need to be flexible? What's my budget? How much does it cost? Does it achieve the aesthetic look that the designer is looking for? So there's a ton of questions that you ask yourself when you're selecting the material and the technology. So I'm going to just touch on some of the more commonly used rapid prototyping technologies, and then I'm going to touch on some of the new emerging technologies that I'm really excited about. First is the fused deposition modeling, which is FDM. That is one of the first technologies that was developed. It's a plastic wire that is forced through a hot nozzle, much like a hot glue gun. So it's squirting a line of plastic down. One of the advantages is it's very economical, but across the layers, it's not as strong. So it has some limited uses there, but it is also very strong. They have high temperature materials available, and you can actually use it as a vacuum forming fixture. We use it for prototype costuming elements. The next one is selective laser sintering, or SLS. This is our family of materials that has the highest material performance, so strength, stiffness, temperature capability. If you're going to use something as an end-use item, this is probably the family of materials you want to select from. It can also have the added benefit of carbon fiber whiskers or mineral fiber whiskers that can give you the stiffness and strength and the lightweight aspect of the material. The stereolithography or multi-jet or polyjet materials are a liquid resin that is cured by UV light. This is our highest resolution family of rapid prototyping. Makes great models for your molds with very little finishing work available or needed. And but the one drawback to this family of materials is the material properties are not as high, so it's less lends itself less to the rapid prototyping of the final part, unless it's a very cosmetic part that is just kind of a plant-on. So, but very high resolution. Then you have direct metal laser sintering. This is becoming more and more of a commonly available technology. If you need the strength and stiffness and high temperature capability of metals, this is the way you go. It's very similar to SLS. SLS starts with a powdered plastic. This starts with a powdered metal that's fused together with a laser. So I'm going to just walk through a couple case studies, and what you'll find is that we don't apply the technology the same for every project. Every project is different, and that's what makes it exciting. There's always a problem-solving aspect to it. But we use the different materials and different technologies, tailor it to the project. So the first case study is the seashell headpiece from the Festival of Fantasy Parade, designed by Marina Rada. When we started this, she wanted the headpiece to look very much like a shell, both in the sculpt and in the look of the materials. So she worked with our digital sculptor to sculpt the look of the shell and the crown. And then on talking to her, she wanted to use the fabrics and the shimmering fibers of the dress in the seashell itself. So I selected a clear SLA material so that we could laminate the fibers and the fabrics of the dress behind the clear material. And when we clear coat it and candy coat it, it actually has the shimmer and look of the fabric of the dress. The crown is a very complicated shape, so we ended up additively manufacturing that for production as well. So after the laminating and the candy coating and the assembly, there you have a headpiece that looks very much like a seashell and is translucent to light. And another one is my favorite character from the Festival of Fantasy, the Raven. He's a stunning character with 12-foot wings and a brass filigree type mask. So when I saw this piece, this design by Marina, it screamed additively manufacturing to me, because this very complicated shape, it's very delicate, be difficult to mold in traditional way. So I had to go after the highest performance materials in order to pull this off for a 3 o'clock parade every day for it to survive. So we went to the SLS material with carbon fiber reinforcement. That gave us the strength, the stiffness, and the high temperature capability of that material to form the mask. And there's in our finishing processes and making it look like a brass material with the crystals, and you end up with a very stunning mask. And it's been in parade for over 4 years with very little incidents, except for when Prince Philip isn't careful with his sword. So the next one is Coral Girl costume from Festival of Fantasy, also designed by Miranda Rada. We use the SLA technology to create the very high resolution models that we need to impart the texture and the feel and the delicacy of the coral materials. So the idea was to cast these in water clear materials with very vibrant colors, with translucency. So the SLA models with its very high resolution lends itself very well to this costume. So incorporating attachment points and casting our molds and then casting our corals, and you end up with a walking, dancing coral. This is one of the costumes that kind of scared me. We have a Rivers of Light costume where we have actually combined additively manufactured components as well as tiles out of more traditional materials. So the designer, Irene Cruz Helena, wanted to have everything look like it belonged together, like it was artisan made. So we sculpted our tiles to look like a hammered leather, and we took advantage of the nylon PA material, which absorbs a dye much like a nylon fabric, to achieve the colors that she wanted, and then did the line work and the distressing on top of it. And when incorporated with the more traditional materials, the metals that are oxidized, has absolutely stunning effect, and it's in show every night at Animal Kingdom. The next one is a Haunted Mansion Madame Leota brooch. This is a design for a operational costume in a retail location. So the designer, Donna Bailey, wanted to incorporate the sculpt of the iconic Madame Leota that is outside of the entrance to Haunted Mansion. So we went out 4 o'clock in the morning, Haunted Mansion, and we were scanning her face and turned that over to the digital modeler, and she incorporated that sculpt into the brooch itself, and then componentized it into 3 discrete components so that we could cast it in 3 different materials. And then it's incorporated back together for the finished product. So those are the more well-known technologies. I also wanted to touch on some of the really cool, interesting technologies coming out that really caught my eye at the last Rapid conference. One is the Carbon 3D printer. Their build envelope is still pretty small, but what's really, really exciting about this technology is they use more production-like resins, silicone, urethane, epoxies, cyanate esters, and they feel like and perform like traditionally cast materials. Also, it's much faster, so I think it could be a much more economical process that could be more lend itself to production. So instead of projecting a point contact of light, it's actually projecting the entire layer at once, kind of like a movie projector. So Impossible Objects is another company that's come out with a technology to get a product more like a laminated composite. So it's layers of fibers that has the binder and resin printed onto it, and it's compressed at temperature and pressure, and it comes out with a continuous fiber reinforcement in a complex 3-dimensional object. So that's very exciting. And then the Stratasys J750 is stunning in its high resolution color, and it can also vary the resin from transparent to opaque. So you can get stunning realism on things like an eye, where it has not only color, it doesn't have color on the surface, it has color through the depth. So that's very exciting for realism. Then there's the HP Jet Fusion. They've created something what you call a voxel, which is sort of like a 3-dimensional pixel. It's a faster process, but what the voxel allows it to do when they tailor their materials is maybe range from opaque to transparent, flexible to rigid, electrically conductive to non-electrically conductive, incorporate color. So what you could actually do with this is potentially have a part that ranges from rigid to flexible, but also build in your electronic circuitry into your part. So that dispenses with the need for wiring. So that could be a huge game changer. So that's a technology to keep an eye on in the next few years. The last one is the Mark Forged carbon fiber printer. There are times when you want to strengthen and stiffen a part in a particular direction. So maybe around a hole or around an axis that needs to be stiffer and stronger than the rest. This, like an FDM printer, will print a fiber in a particular path. So that's also a very exciting technology for strength and stiffness. So, I mean, the key takeaway from this is there's so many materials out there, and you know the technology is changing so fast, and I could see the next 5 to 10 years being able to print just about anything that you could want, whether it's a costume or a prop or a mechanical part or an animatronic part.
Good afternoon. When we come to electrify the costume designs, the following are several of the elements that are commonly adopted. We begin with our RGB LEDs, which is the most common solution for programmable color or matrix features. Our latest proprietary components comes in the form of smart RGB fabrics light strand or entire pieces of small RGB fabric patches. A key feature of this is that the RGB LEDs are surface mounted directly on the conductors, netted together with inherent flame retardant mounts in any dimension, and can also be stitched directly onto the costume. In addition to maintaining enhanced softness and flexibility, the most important solution of this proprietary component is addressing broken cable connection point, which is one of the major reliabilities throughout usage. Electroluminescent printed EL pervades over the entire wearable illuminated market and has been widely adopted for lighting costumes lately, due to a series of groundbreaking evolutions such as the first generation soft crushable and machine washable frame. 3G panels make multiple planed complex forming possible due to its high repeatability. Furthermore, 3G frames are capable to be encapsulated with many different types of materials, even those that are difficult to process. A good example is we succeeded in encapsulating 3G frames with carbon fiber in one piece and deformed it simultaneously. Other than some basic advantages of EL, such as full surface illumination and 3D animation, other new technologies, such as the dual side lids in one panel and stickers, upheld by the organic grade EL, which can provide over 1,000 CD per meter square, compares to around 100 CD for conventional EL, will mostly definitely broaden the design possibility a great deal. When we come to fiber optics, which is also a crucial light element to achieve certain lighting designs for costumes. Addressing its main weak point, we apply special coating treatments to overcome the cracking and peeling due to aging, as well as to minimize the breaking up during daily usage, particularly for those needed to be twisted and deformed in the particle form or particular form or shape. This coating serves to enhance the overall durability. I believe in the close future, when printed LED really can move to commercial availability, we create a new era for light-up costumes by further diminishing the existing lighting technology's boundary. In our digitally progressive world, a fully programmable system is a key factor to develop the perfect solution for lighting's programmers' needs. Could we create the most fabulous computers controlled scenes through a DMX interface? This allowed all lighting elements to be individually controllable via a DMX signal. The latest portable control system is consolidating the DMX signal receiver module, interpreting MCU and the driving circuit for multiple light components. capable of handling 7 to 16 group of DMX signals, saving space, weight, and most of all, troublesome cables and connectors, linking from receiving module to interpret MCU module and then to driver.
And then, hello. And then the last step is to work closely with the customer to map out how wire shall be routed, so as to leave adequate surface loop to prevent stress on the wire connections, as well as to secure all lighting components, protecting the wiring system inside the custom from accidental undue stress and pulling force from movements created by the performer's choreography or dressing and undressing, in order to ensure the whole setting works effectively and reliable during daily operation. We'll further enhance the ease of this by adopting bespoke flexible printed circuits, FPC in short, to replace hundreds of wirings of any lighting systems on backpacks, braces, and pops. The following is a very good example to show the advantage of integrated FPC in a large carbon fiber backpack incorporated with LEDs and dual-side large format print EL, saving hundreds of wirings and creating a more flat and neat finish without any permanent marks, minimizing the risk of delamination of the protection finishing. Looking into the future, I believe 3D printing will be the game-changing technology for custom lighting design, which will be able to print out everything in layers, including fabric, OLED, OEL, circuitry, battery, or even electronics components in one single finished pieces. At this present time, fabric, OLED, and OEL can already be printed digitally, and it is just a matter of time for the rest to follow. Thank you very much for your time, and I hope you enjoy my presentation.
Thank you, everybody. I hope we inspired you. And unfortunately, we ran out of time. There will be no Q&A in this session, but thank you so much. Please find us if you do have any questions. Have a good one.